We're going to talk about the fifth habit for podcasters, and that is attuned. Are they attuned? Are they understanding first, or are they active listening? Now, podcasters feel it every week, and that is the urge to feel the silence, to impress the guest, and to rush to the next question. But developing this habit and the skill of attunement, or attuning to the guest, understanding first, and active listening is going to be the key for success. Okay, this is a skill that you can practice right away. Now, I would like to say that we are not naturally, especially people of my personality bent, we're not naturally fully present. And that is, we have to begin to develop intentionality to be fully present. And that's going to make sure that the guest has a great experience. Because one of the key goals in having guests is also networking and to have a good conversation, that is to entertain, educate, or inform the audience, or to tell a story, whatever it is. But it's also to make sure that the guest has the most amazing experience possible. And that is that we were a good host, and we showed up and we asked the right questions, and they had a great experience. At the end of the guest appearance, they should feel amazing. They should feel like they had a great time, and they should feel like that they want to do it again. All right. So by the end of this episode, you are going to have my framework for how I show up inside of guest interviews. And by all means, I'm not coming off as an expert in that sense. The way that I'm presenting this is just farther along the road than most. And that is, I've done hundreds and hundreds of interviews with entrepreneurs, business owners, doctors, you name it, lawyers, dentists, all kinds of people that were elite inside of their profession. Now, inside of that there was a lot of millionaires. I interviewed a lot of people that made a lot of money and were really successful. All right. So I'm coming to you with the frame of, I've just got a little bit of reps and a little bit of practice. I know when I watch my interviews that I still have work to do. I'm not coming across that way, but what I'm coming across is I know a little bit after interviewing hundreds and hundreds of people, and I'm going to give you the inside scoop to my frame and to what I use. And it's going to be very valuable for you. And I'd like to say another thing before we move on. This is not going to be a one-size-fits-all approach. Like I have scripts, I have ways to show up, I have different things to give you. Like, pick what feels natural to you and the one that you want to roll with. Don't feel like you have to be me or to be any other person out there who is in the podcast game, okay? Be yourself, pick how you want to show up, and begin to craft your interviews like that. Now, one of the people that I look up to is Tim Ferriss. Now, the reason why I look up to Tim Ferriss is because he really had the bold audacity in the podcasting world to have the belief and the desire to create something great out of his podcast. And not only something great, but he actually doesn't have to really do anything else except his podcast. That's it. Now, can you imagine being at the place where all you have to do is your podcast and that's it for the rest of your life? That sounds amazing. That sounds like exactly where I want to go. But he had the bold audacity to set that as the destination, and then to work with a really hyper-focused intentionality that he was going to treat his podcast like a business and that it was going to earn massive income one day. Now, I would point out that this is the reason why I look up to him, because his bold audacity. And I also would point out that if you're listening to this, let's start with the end in mind. Let's start with there, because you've probably given that analogy that if you shoot for the moon, you're probably going to hit the stars. That's kind of truth in that statement. Is if you're aiming kind of in the vicinity, it is a good possibility that you're going to get pretty darn close. And that's the objective. Like these big, hairy goals that you set up for your life, those are kind of the same thing. This is something to shoot for. And because of your aim and focus is shooting towards that thing, it's a good possibility that you're going to get pretty close to that revenue goal. You're going to get pretty close to those downloads. You're going to get pretty close to your podcast having maximum reach and impact. All right. So that's my spiel on Tim Ferriss. Amazing, bold audacity. At any rate, he stares at this red recording light and he hates how loud the room gets when nobody talks. You know, that awkward silence. And he's hosting his podcast now. It started in April of 2014. And he keeps going until it turns into hundreds and hundreds of episodes. And he learned something very quickly is that to navigate interviews effectively, he's going to have to learn some skills. And some of those skills is nervous energy, awkward silences. All right. So this is the day he has a guest that he respects. His name is Cal Fussman. Tim has read Cal's work and he knows his reputation. Cal is the kind of guy who asks question and then waits like he just owns the time. And then Tim hears that Cal eats breakfast with Larry King almost every morning, like it's just completely normal. Right. So this is a very high influential sort of guest, and Tim wants to impress. Can you blame him? Right? And he's prepared, over prepared. And he has all of these notes and all of these follow-up questions, and they're all stacked like ammo. And he has his big old things, and he wants the guest to like him, and he wants the listener to think, man, Tim is really, really sharp. And then during the interview, Cal finishes his first answer, and then there's that awkward moment of silence. What do I do now? And of course, our reflex is to fill the time instead of sit with it, instead of ponder it for a second, instead of digesting it. Our natural tendency is to fill the time really, really quick. So is he going to rescue the moment? Is he going to jump in with a long question that has 3 questions inside of it? You've heard those people. What is he going to do? So Cal just kind of sits there and waits, and then he feels something on the inside that silence is not the enemy. Silence is a lever. And if you can be okay with pausing and reflecting instead of filling the gap with every single word, you can be effective. All right. So Tim makes a turning point decision. He stops, he shuts his mouth, he looks at his notes, but he doesn't touch them. He lets the empty space sit there, like wait. 5 seconds. Cal begins to shift in his chair. Cal clears his throat. And then Cal begins to say some things that would never have been said if Tim didn't just sit there. And it was something raw. And it was something effective, and it communicated strongly. And it was because he took a moment to pause and to reflect. All right. So the key thing here is, am I going to show up? Am I going to actively listen? Am I going to pause and reflect? Or am I going to feel the silence as much as I can? Now, here's what I know about editing. All right. If you are talking for 50 minutes, like I do almost every day, that there is going to be about 10 minutes of blank space, at least with my form of communication, that with a 50-minute talk inside of editing, 10 minutes can come off. All right. And so the reality is that you don't need to worry so much about filling every single gap. A lot of these things can happen in post-production, but some of those things you want to leave in because the guest said something weighty and you don't want a half a second till the person talks again. You want there to be weight. You want them to sit with it. All right. Not just to jump. And you can see, like inside of a show, how it gets very choppy. And that is because they think that the pause and reflecting moments, all of them that need to be taken out, and they don't. And so it's like all of this choppy little stuff, and it doesn't present well. All right. So be okay with awkward silence. Now, have you ever met somebody who you're having a conversation with and they dominate? I mean, they absolutely positively dominate the conversation. And I've been in meetings like this, one-on-one meetings with people that I looked up to and respect, and they were like a mentor mentee fashion and all that different stuff. And I did come there with something to talk about that was on my heart. And we get into dialogue, and the person cannot shut up. And, I look at my watch, and he's been going on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And 2 hours later, after hearing all the like verbal dump and the unburdening of everything that was going on in his life, I kind of forgot why I was there to begin with. But the reality of what was on my heart never got brought to the surface, is because the person would not be quiet. Now, I think there's a little bit of narcissistic behavior that's involved in that. And there's also a little bit of, if I pause, I might get some feedback that I might not like, or I might a control thing where I'm the one directing the conversation. And so if I allow somebody else to interject, then the conversation might go a way that I don't want it to go. There could be multiple different reasons behind the behavior. But if you've experienced it, you know how it is to be inside of it and how terrible it feels after the end. And you know that the person didn't give a rip about what was going on with you. All they cared about was their own thoughts and ideas and stuff. And it's absolutely exhausting. Exhausting. I've been in a couple different conversations like that last to the 2 hour range. And at the end, when it comes to your word count, it was absolutely very minimal. When their word count is, who knows, like half a book. Man, they could have went up to 15 to 20,000 words. Like, I don't know. And then at the end, you're just flat out exhausted. It is so draining, right? Now, I bring that up because obviously we don't want to be that guy. When you bring on a guest, there should be probably, I would lean towards maybe 25 you, 75% them. Now, there could be maybe a higher ratio, maybe 33 and 66 is if you're, really engaged in a conversation. Man, I've been engaged in deep conversations with people that went deep, and it warrant a equal kind of reply back from me. And so the word count on both sides was pretty well. But you bring on a guest to share their expertise, not yours. Now, have you ever met a person who was so present in actively listening, coupled with they were just so genuinely interested in you? I absolutely love these people. I love being around these people. And I can think of immediately two people come to mind. And when you get into a room or conversation with these people, they're high status and they're poised, and you have their 100% focus. They're looking you in the eye and they're asking you questions that are just drawing out genuine interest. And they have perfected the art of conversationalist. Now, I do believe that these people, they have overcoming these sort of narcissistic tendencies that make everything about them. And I think that they actually love people, and they're interested. They're really interested, not for flattery, not for fakery, not to anything else. They're actually interested in what it is that you do and what is going on inside of your life. And these people make you feel wonderful. All right. So I put the dichotomy up because I want you to see who you want to be. Do you want to be the guy that bulldozes the conversation and it's all about you and your stories and all these different things? Or do you want to be the guy that is so present and actively listening and moving the conversation forward in a way that is professional and poised? Which one do you want to be? All right. That is the dichotomy. So I'm under the impression that you want to be great. And so that's why I'm leading you down this path. And to be able to do that, number one, we have to be fully present. And that is, we got to put our phones down. We got to look them in the eye. If you're on camera, look straight in to the camera, right? Pay attention, focus, be here now, and listen to understand exactly what it is that they're saying. Don't be crafting your next reply. In fact, I'm going to show you something really, really neat that can help you in this fashion. It can help you get out of craft your next reply mode. because that is really damaging. Because if the person is talking and all we're doing is crafting our reply, then at that moment, active, fully present listening goes off, and we're inside of our head and we're doing some things and makes us not present. Okay, so fully present. Do I understand what is being communicated? Is my phone put away? Am I in this moment right here, right now? All right. Number 2 is reflect back what you heard. Now, instead of going on to the next question, and let me tell you, a lot of amateurs do this, is that after they're done, they just ask the next question. And let me tell you, this is a great hindrance to the conversationalist, because there should be something that from what they said can almost carry the conversation forward for the rest of the episode, honestly. Now, I've been in conversations with people where I listened attentively for the first 4 minutes and was able to take them on a journey that they established from the beginning, and I set my script aside and I didn't need it. All right. Scripts are like backup plans when it comes to interviews. Backup plan. And that is, you gotta have a backup plan. It's not your main plan. It's your backup. And that is, if presentness gets lost, you might get in your head, you might lose focus, maybe you have a lot of nervous energy or whatever it is, and something happens, you don't know where to go. Then you go back to the script and the questions that you've created. Hopefully, you can get back to being present and understand what it is that they're dropping to begin to communicate on that. All right? So reflect back what you hear. Something that happens in your own life. All right? 3, ask clarifying questions, even if you already know, but you know that your audience might be confused about what is being communicated. So ask them to clarify, what did you mean by that? Especially if they're using insider lingo. Not everybody knows the inside lingo. All right? And so explain to me what you mean by that. Can you give an example? Right? Ask clarifying questions. Now, if somebody is getting raw, and I've found this periodically, man, I've interviewed some people that had some stories. Now, one, this is going to blow your socks off. One, his grandfather was his dad. Go ahead and figure that out. Let that sit with you a little bit. So I'm interviewing him and I have no idea about this information, that his grandfather is also his dad. And so we're having the conversation. He was there for a faith-based podcast. And then he drops this bomb. And I'm like, holy smokes, right? And what do you do with something like that? And that is, you have to begin to be in the moment. You have to pause. You have to validate the feelings that are being brought up, because when a person says that, there is all kinds of emotions that are attached to what being said. And so, of course, we spent time talking about that because it was highly, highly relevant. All right. I've talked to a guy who his father committed suicide. I talked to a guy whose wife committed suicide, and then his daughter later committed suicide. It was a 1-2 punch, just boom, boom. And that is, I've had some conversations about some deep, deep, dark stuff. And so we have to create space for when those things come up. And sometimes they will. All right. Now, number 5 is to make sure that you pause before responding. Give a 2 to 3 second pause. If you think it's too long, cut it out later. This is going to signal that I'm not just trying to come up with more things to say. I'm not just concerned with my own voice. I'm concerned with my guest and the experience that we're having together right now. All right. So let me in behind the scenes for a second. So I have a script that I have for every single interview, and I'm going to share that with you, kind of the frame for that. But that is the backup plan. My main mode of operation is to get them to talk and to share as much as possible at the beginning, so I can hear and see what it is that they're passionate about. All right. And so instead of me getting in my head, what I do is put a one-word prompt. And so if they triggered something in me that I would love to explore deeply, I would put a one-word prompt. So after they're done, I could just glance over at the prompt and I could be re-triggered to the emotions and to the experience that it gave me. What you don't want to do is get in your head and think about that thing and flushing that whole thing out and then thinking about your next question and all these things. You don't want to do that because you're losing presentness. You're no longer present. All right. So sometimes within the first 5 minutes, I might write 3 things down. Those things might carry the whole episode forward. All right. I don't sit there and stew on them. I'm just writing them because I'm being prompted for them when there is a moment to go down that journey. Okay. So your main mode of operation is get them to talk and get kind of a feel from them, the direction that would best suit them. Now, they already have the script too. They already have the questions beforehand. So they've done a little bit of study and they kind of know what direction they're going to take and all of those different things. But if you incorporate this, you'll be more of a conversationalist and you'll be like playing tennis. And that is kind of lobbying back and forth throughout the whole episode instead of Q&A. And you can tell the difference between Q&A and tennis. And after you do an episode, you'll notice that the tennis match feels a lot better. I was like, man, that really flowed. Man, I could have talked to this guy for a long time. I wasn't even looking at the clock when he was talking. Like all of these different things happen when you play tennis with somebody instead of Q&A. So the goal is to have Q&A as a backup plan, but to be present and to pay attention. All right. So here's the backup plan. And that is if your guest is a specialist and they solve a big problem inside of the world, you're going to want to first have them paint the problem. All right. Right from the beginning. That way, those who are listening show up. They know exactly what you're talking about. They know the problems that this guest is here to solve. And let me tell you, they don't have to be deep. We often think that problems have to be deep, and they really don't. If you're bringing on an entertainer, they don't really have to be deep. Their main problem or solution that they're giving is to bring people a sense of joy and laughter. And so you can still paint the problem, and it doesn't have to be very deep, but some will be very deep, okay? And so I did a mock one for this episode today, and I did it upon scaling a business. So paint the problem. And that is, we're going to expose the silent struggles most founders face when trying to scale. And so what I have here is different categories that take people on a journey. And then I have 3 questions inside of each frame. Now, you may, like me, have over time have already incorporated the journey. And that is, once I get them to paint the problem, I already know my whole system and structure, and I know the way that I'm going to take them. But until you learn that, it's good to have a skeleton frame that you take people on. So the first question looks like this. What do most entrepreneurs get wrong when they try to scale too early or too fast? Boom. That hits home right from the beginning. We're painting the problem and we're tapping into the guest expertise because he said that he is fluent in scaling businesses. All right. Now you do this for anything. If they're affluent in exiting businesses, they're affluent in developing self-control. Like it really doesn't matter what topic they bring. This frame and skeleton will always work. All right. The next part of the process is explaining why it's a problem. And that is revealing the hidden cost, in this case, of chasing scale without a sense of structure or doing it too slow or too fast or not at the right time. Why is that even a problem? So the question goes like this. What is the real price of scaling without clarity on your systems, on your teams, and on your vision? What is the price or the consequence of doing this? So now we got problem and we got the pain or the consequence associated with the problem that is being presented. All right. And then you go into step number 3, and that is to unpack the emotional impact. All right. If you show up without clarity, and if you try to scale too fast or too slow or a wrong time, what does that journey look like for the founder? What does that do to their confidence, their identity, their relationships? What is going on the inside of them? All right. Now we're addressing the emotional pain and impact of the problem. All right. Number 4 is to address the belief systems that are keeping people back. All right. And that is calling out the things that are holding the founder back. Are they scatterbrained? Are they self-sabotaging? Are they losing focus? What is the cause and the reason behind the problem that is connected to belief systems? All right. So what this question looks like is, what limiting beliefs do you see consistently in founders that block their ability to grow? Very simple, right? And so this is the part where you take it on the journey to begin to bust the sacred cows. And that is, you're going into the internal belief and dialogue that is creating the results inside of their life. All right. That was number 4. Number 5 is breakthrough. All right. We don't want to leave people inside of their problem, their pain, and the consequences and their limiting beliefs. We want to give breakthrough. These are solutions. These are possibilities. This is what change actually looks like and what it took for that business to create scalable growth. All right. And so you would ask a question for them, something like this. How did you go from hustling to leading, from scarcity to abundance? And what did that transition demand of you? All right. So now we're breaking through to principles and possibilities and keys. And so this is where you're going to get into success principles, strategies, steps. All of these different things are going to be this part. Now, I'd like to point out that we spent a lot of time, 4 categories, not in tips and tricks and strategies and all these different things. It's really important. It is far more important for problem recognition and for addressing the problem and the pain associated with that problem and the reason behind it than it is so much all of the possibilities, right? I mean, the possibilities are important, but if you go to keys, tips, and tricks and all these different things, you're not dealing with the other side of the equation. You're just giving people behavior management and modification, and you're not dealing with any of the pain or the beliefs that are fueling this, right? For example, if somebody is self-sabotaging inside of scaling their business, they're doing so based upon their own need behavior. And that is, they could be the bottleneck inside of the company because they need to be needed. And that is, they're not going to let go and to delegate appropriately and create the systems and strategies because of the internal insecurity that they have. So you could talk about systems and strategies and all of those different things, tips and tricks, and there ain't nothing going to change until you get them to be honest about the problem recognition. All right? You see where I'm coming from. Lastly, number 6 is the practical action. That is the thing that they must do after they hear this message. All right? Question will go something like this. For the business owner who is out there listening, who's stuck between this survival scarcity mode and scaling, what should he do right now? What one action should he take? One action. And this guarantees that the person listening is going to get a win from their investment of time with you. They are going to get a win. All right. Now, what I also love to end with, and this is a really good last question, is out of the conversation that we had today, what is the thing that you want the person to take away from this conversation? What this does is it allows your guest to provide a summary, to take everything that he said and bring it down into things that he feels is most important. Let me tell you, this is gold. This is absolutely gold to do that. All right? All right. So we're going to go into a couple of different styles of interview. And with this part, feel free to pick your lane. Now, what I did from this was I included my frame in this. So everything that I've spoken up to this is my frame. This is how I show up and this is what I do. Now, what I have done is I have picked and selected some of the best hosts in interviews of all time. And I've examined the psychology behind them and why they were really, really effective. All right. And each one is kind of different in their own right. None of them are the same. And so I got the psychology and the scoop behind it and what they did to show up like that. And I want to give it to you for your benefit. All right. So this one is a calm opener. And that is their main goal is to disarm first, to build a rapport, to make sure that before we dive into anything deep, there's a very like surface level sort of engagement. And there's not anything like hard hitting at the beginning. And that is, this is calm. We're getting to know each other. We're building a rapport. Everything's good. And it's going to build up to something really, really deep. But it starts out as very slow and very safe. And then they go into the deep. And they are starting with feelings, emotions, and identities and values and fears and all of these different things. So they're asking questions that are going to bring out the things on the inside, all right? Because the way that they're interviewing is to dig up those things. And let me tell you, this is a highly effective way to do an interview, all right? And the way to do this, or the way that I've discovered the psychology behind people that utilize this, is that they lead with their vulnerability first. And what that does is it gives permission for the other person to be vulnerable, all right? And that's a great skill. I'm going to show up. I'm going to let my guard down. I'm going to share something that is vulnerable about me. And so you can kind of feel safe and recognize that this is going to be this kind of show. And, I'm going to cut away the awkwardness by me just telling something vulnerable about me. All right. Now, this is going to be a very empathetic form of communication because there's going to be a lot of raw emotions that are involved in that. And so it's the keep digging of the story until there's really nothing left to talk about. All right. What that looks like is that they take them to more story-oriented stuff and they're digging out the gold and the information, and then they are bringing it to a practical application and conclusion. All right. Super, super easy. Super, super good. All right. So one thing that I want to point out is that it's super important to give value to the guest. So if you're taking them on this storytelling journey, it would be super important for them to get something in return. And that something in return is plugging themselves. Like make sure that you don't skip this. This is common etiquette. So after you get them to summarize and to bring and to drive the point home, make sure that you give them an opportunity to tell them where people can find them and where they can reach out to them and what they got going on inside of their lives. It's just common podcaster etiquette to do that, and it'll go a long way with people. All right. So we got two frames so far. We got the problem, pain, possibility kind of frame that I laid out for you that I use. We also have the frame of pulling out the information, writing down the prompts so everything flows, so it's like tennis and going back and forth. We have the storyteller frame that kind of pulls the insight out and has the person tell their story. Those are highly, highly effective too. So you got three powerful frames to show up inside of your interview skills. Pick one, and I think, find what works for you and work it. All right. The most important thing is the application. I'll see you tomorrow.